Hi. Well, he introduced me, so I don't need to say my name. Can you hold this for now? Awesome. My childhood wasn't really that easy. My parents got divorced when I was 1 year old, or maybe younger, I'm not entirely sure. But it wasn't a good divorce. They were both kind of immature about it, and the effects of that last even to today. They still can't be in a room together. And my two sisters, one's 21, one's 28, have all been affected like me. And I, as a very young child, started paying attention to how people moved, how they stood, their facial expressions, their gestures with their hands, how they walked, the direction they faced, and I started cataloging the different movements and clusters of movements that would show that a fight was about to start. So I could protect myself and be prepared and not get caught up in the fight and leave. And it wasn't until about 6 months ago when I started reading up on body language that I realized that's what I was teaching myself to do. I was teaching myself how to read people's body language and determine what they were thinking so that I could react to that. And, sorry. Everybody speaks different languages. There's 6,500 different spoken languages in the world, but everybody speaks the same body language. It's universal, and I started noticing that outside of my family, that I could tell when my friends were uncomfortable. I could tell when people were nervous on a stage. I hope you can't tell that. I could tell when my friends went from being sad to being happy, and that was really the best feeling in the world, talking to someone and watching nervous gestures or a frown, a sad face turn to upbeat happiness and just having a really good day. And that was my favorite thing to do. So I stumbled across the Free Hugs campaign video on YouTube. And I may have watched it 3 or 4 times in a row. And I really loved it. I didn't get enough hugs when I was little. And if you ask anyone that knows me, I give out way too many, if such a thing exists. And so one day, I'll take my sign back now. I decided to go, and I took a sign much like this. I didn't write this. My handwriting is atrocious. And I went to Santa Monica, and I walked up and down for hours with a sign. And I kind of got the response I expected. I was laughed at. People pointed at me. People gave me a wide berth. People don't generally walk around with signs like these. They generally keep their heads down and walk. So it was a difficult half hour. And I was deciding to go, and that it was a little bit of a failure, but at least it was a beautiful day, and I tried. And I saw a woman walking. She was walking with a friend. I'm going to fidget with this. She was walking with a friend, and her arms were crossed and gripping her ribs. Oh, wow. Her shoulders were tucked in, her eyes were puffy, the corner of her lips were pointed down. She was obviously devastated, and there was a dead shuffle to her walk, and it hurt to look at her. She looked up, and her eyes were red, she was crying, and when she saw me, she burst into tears and ran up and gave me a hug. It was the first hug of the day, and I was kind of really surprised. I didn't expect one, and here's this woman clinging to me and bawling into my ear. And she gradually mastered her breathing and whispered in my ear that morning, it was Mother's Day 2010, sorry. She whispered in my ear that morning she had found out that her son was being called for another tour of duty in Iraq, and she wouldn't see him for another 4 Mother's Days. If anybody knows what they would have said to that woman, please tell me afterwards, because 3 years later, I still don't know what I would have said to her. I was incoherent, I couldn't talk, I may have been rambling like I am now, but I could not for the life of me think of what to say to this woman. And I hugged her and did everything I could, and when she walked away, her shoulders were up and back, her face was up, she was smiling, there were still tears streaming down her face, but she looked alive. And I thought it was a fluke. It couldn't happen again. It was amazing, but that was one thing. And then I passed 2 businessmen wearing very fancy suits and Bluetooths and suitcases and briefcases. And one of them I passed them both, didn't get a second glance, and then I heard, "Hold up." So I turn around, and one of them puts the briefcase down, and takes the Bluetooth out of their ear and puts it in their pocket. I think they were mid-call, runs over and gives me a hug, and then runs back to his friend and continues walking. And then I'm still completely in disbelief. There are many other hugs that day, but the last memorable one was a bus driver stopped the bus at a green light. And if you're from California, New York, Boston, anywhere with horrible traffic, you don't want to do this. And opened the doors and beckoned me on and gave me a hug, and I turned to get off, and half of the bus had stood up and formed a line for me to hug them. And I saw the same thing from every single person when I walked away. They were happier, they were standing taller, their eyes were brighter, they had this radiance. It was as if the sun had come out, something had changed, and I was astounded. There was no words I can say to do that same thing. So I decided, I'm a scientist at heart, and I decided to do a little experiment. So I went outside a mall, and for a couple of hours, I opened the door, and that's it. If I made eye contact, I smiled, and that was it. And every single time I made eye contact and smiled and held the door for someone, they walked away smiling, and they walked away a little bit happier. And at this point, I'm flabbergasted. I love that word. And everything I was doing, these little things were making people happy. So I decided to take an even bigger step back, and I took a bus down to one end of the valley, San Fernando Valley, and I decided to walk and just go. So for about 6 or 7 miles, I walked, and every time I passed someone, I smiled at them and I waved. I may have said good morning, I may have said hello, whatever it was. I turned around to watch them as they walked away, and every single one was walking a little taller than when I saw them the first time. And everyone was walking with a spring in their step, a smile. Smile, whatever it was, they were a little happier than when I started. So I want to tell a little story, because I love this story. There's an old man, and he's walking on the beach, and he sees a little girl, and she keeps bending down and running to the ocean and tossing something in, and then running back. And she keeps doing this, and he gets curious enough, so he goes over and says, "Little girl, what are you doing?" She says, "The tide's going out, and all these starfish are going to die unless I throw them back in." And the old man laughs to himself and says, "But don't you realize that there are miles and miles of beaches and hundreds of starfish? You can't possibly make a difference." So the little girl thinks for a second, bends down, picks one up, and throws it into the water, smiles and looks at the man and says, "I made a difference to that one." And what I learned is every single thing you do will cause a ripple. And just like a pebble in a pond, it's nothing, it's small, it's insignificant, but you can change someone's day, and you can make them smile first time that day, last time that day, whatever it is, you can change their day with something as small as a hug. Thank you.